Global climate change is a severe crisis that has befallen the Earth in the last few decades. The issue is causing very strange changes in the Earth. In fact, it is altering our very lives. It is an extremely pressing issue, and it is up to us to solve it in the next 30 to 40 years, or we will reach a point of no return. To talk about the issue of climate change, first we should know a little bit about how it started. It is a problem that is caused by different forms of pollution. It has boomed in the past century due to the rapid increase in industrialization. Inventions such as affordable automobiles, personal computers, cellular phones, and other technologies have rapidly increased in the last century. In addition to that, plastic goods of all forms are becoming cheaper and cheaper to create, and are therefore becoming produced more and more. To make these objects, massive, wasteful factories are erected. Factories and other such facilities that are spinning out pollution around the clock are rapidly increasing in numbers, but they are not sustainable. They are built to produce items as cost-efficiently as possible, but they do not dispose well of the waste they create. Excess from these factories is not being recycled properly, and is therefore causing global climate change to rapidly increase in intensity. Before we talk about the implications of climate change, we should also know about how it works on a scientific level. Climate change is caused by carbon emissions going up into the atmosphere and stopping solar radiation from escaping the Earth. This radiation is trapped in the Earth's atmosphere instead of escaping back into space. Despite popular opinion, this radiation can have a variety of effects on the Earth, not just warming it. Because of this, global climate change is a more accurate term than global warming. Why is climate change a problem? Against popular opinion, climate change can have a variety of effects on the Earth, aside from just warming it. It can cause all sorts of strange weather, temperature, and precipitation patterns. Here's the voice of Michael Newman explaining his perspective on the subject.
The biggest problem with global climate change is that it will impact everybody, but in ways that are hard to predict and often far off in the future. And so it's easy for society to address problems that are right in your face and have a clear and immediate cause, but we don't tend to do a very good job of addressing things that are going to happen far in the future and in ways that are hard to predict. So climate change is already showing negative impacts on society through storm size and drought cycles and things like that. It's only going to get worse, but it's going to get worse in some cases far off in the future when it'll already be too late to address. So that, to me, the biggest problem with climate change is the length in which it takes for the problems to occur.
When discussing the issue of climate change, it is important to see both sides of the matter. There are people, companies, and organizations who for various reasons believe that climate change is a hoax.
Global warming. New Yale study says 57% of teens understand that global warming is caused mostly by humans' activities. Is it really now?
I don't believe climate change is real. I think this is global warming hysteria and alarmism.
So-called global warming, which isn't happening.
Global warming is illusory. We're actually going through a period of global cooling.
Calling carbon dioxide a pollutant? Come on.
This is our Fox News global warming alert for you. It is freezing.
Blizzard versus global warming. Who do you believe, Al Gore or your freezing butt?
A pre-winter into winter storm like Europe hasn't seen in years. Forget about all that global warming talk.
It's not global warming, I'll tell you that.
Another storm could be headed this way next week. Global warming, where are you? We want you back.
New developments today involving those hacked emails from Britain suggesting scientists are fudging data to make their case for global warming.
This is a scandal that blew the entire environmental movement to shreds.
But there isn't even one study that can be produced that shows that carbon dioxide is a harmful gas.
Every time we exhale,
we exhale carbon dioxide.
We don't know what those other cycles were caused by in the past. Could be dinosaur flagellants, or who knows.
Everything looked frozen right to the depths of the ground. And it just makes you wonder, where is this global warming that's going to save us?
Electric cars are exactly what they sound like. Cars that run on an electric engine rather than a standard conventional internal combustion engine. They have been attempted over the past few centuries, but only recently have they become commercially viable. They've been attempted for all kinds of reasons, from energy preservation to affordability.
I think driving an electric car like the Nissan Leaf does a couple of things for the environment. I don't think that it's solving climate change. I don't think that it's necessarily even reducing my carbon footprint by a drastic amount at the end of the day. But what I do think that it's doing, most importantly, and then I'll talk about the second thing, is that it's creating an awareness about the future of transportation. I firmly believe that transportation is changing rapidly, and that electric vehicles or battery electric vehicles will be far more widespread and efficient and better for the environment as a result of people investing in the technology now.
The environmental impact was quite significant because we're putting so much carbon into the atmosphere that we're fundamentally changing the chemical makeup of Earth's atmosphere and the oceans too, because of the CO2 that gets absorbed into the water and creates carbonic acid. So if we don't take corrective action, the probability of a catastrophe will increase over time. Eventually there's certainty of a catastrophic outcome. And the longer it takes us to make that transition, the greater the probability of something bad happening.
Electric cars are much more efficient than standard internal combustion engine driven vehicles for one major reason. They don't produce carbon emissions. Because internal combustion engine vehicles produce carbon emissions to propel themselves forward, they are one of the main causes of global climate change. However, electric cars do not produce carbon emissions to propel themselves because they use electrical engines. Electric cars are therefore much more both energy and much more efficient towards the environment. There is some controversy about electric cars, and specifically their batteries, because they produce much more pollution than standard vehicles to produce, but with the advancement of technology, and still overall, electric cars come out far ahead of standard vehicles in terms of the environment, and with the progression of technology, electric cars will become even more efficient. This is particularly important because cars are the largest mode of transportation in the world, and by far, and therefore the fact that they are so inefficient and so wasteful is extremely relevant and extremely important towards the environment. So electric cars are a major piece of solving global climate change.
I wanted to support the sort of early adopter phase. I read a research paper by some people at UC Berkeley who compared a Nissan Leaf with a hybrid vehicle and then a normal car. And they evaluated it as a total energy consumption from the birth of the car to the death of the car, including all of the small details that I think a lot of people forget, like what it takes to mine nickel and cobalt and lithium for the batteries. They considered how much energy it takes to transport fuel across the country, how much energy it takes to refine crude oil into gasoline, and where most people's electricity comes from, because that's a common counter argument to driving an electric car as well. You're just shifting where the emissions are coming from the tailpipe to the grid, the electric grid. So I read that and I was kind of inspired to really look at the data, and there is an obvious benefit. In the late 90s, GM did their sort of pilot program with the EV1, which was kind of the first consumer electric vehicle for major road use, and it was really popular. And for some reason, they stopped developing that technology. There are some theories on all sides of the political spectrum, but I think that kind of was the beginning of exploring this idea of using electricity for car transport. And I think battery technology got a lot better, and it's getting better. So I think probably over the last 3 years, including this year, there have been more advances in the technology or the technological aspects of battery electric vehicles. Specifically in energy density, so like how much energy a battery can hold, how cost effective it is. That's, I think, the most limiting thing. It's still expensive to drive around with a couple $1,000 pounds of batteries in your car. And but companies like Tesla and Nissan and other manufacturers too are, I think, on the right track. And I think in 5 or 10 more years, to look at the future, there's going to be a serious cost reduction and a lot more cars on the road running off batteries.
If you go back to when I was first thinking about electric cars, I was in college, and it was really more from the standpoint of the need to transition to some transport means that was sustainable, independent of whether there was an environmental impact or not. Because if we're burning oil to move, and that's not a renewable resource, then independent of any environmental impact, we must find some alternative, or there will be economic collapse. And civilization will crumble, or revert. So that was actually originally why I was very interested in it. It's just because I think from a physics standpoint, it's really obviously the way to go. Electric motors, kind of crazy to do something else. When I think of Tesla, what's the fundamental good that Tesla can achieve? It would be to accelerate the advent of electric vehicles, perhaps by unfortunately a decade or something like that. Because it'll happen anyway. We kind of take Tesla's not around. So that's a really fundamental good. And since we're making cars, I mean, it seems like we should try to make really good cars.
Why does transportation need to advance? Transportation is one of the largest, if not the largest, ways that humans absorb energy in the world. It is currently extremely inefficient, and there is a large amount of room for improvement. Transportation is one of the biggest things that is advancing and needs to advance in the next century for the benefit of the human race. What is the future of transportation? Is it simply electric cars with better batteries, more efficient engines? Is it the Urbi, a car created to be as aerodynamic and efficient as possible? Or is it something altogether entirely new?
Within cities, it's sort of tunnels and tubes, for long distance travel, I really think vertical landing electric supersonic aircraft is the way to go, I think it's very doable. So that'll be the way to go for long distance transportation, like for if you're going more than like 500 miles. So then you have any-to-any. You solve the any-to-any problem over a long distance. For shorter distances, because you have a time to climb and a time to descend penalty, below 500 miles, aircraft are not as good. That's why I think some sort of evacuated tube is a better way to travel.
The Hyperloop, for example, is one that I'm excited about. We actually just talked about the solar plane that's flying from China to Hawaii in class, and we also talked about NASA's developing another type of electric plane. So I think a lot of people are doing a lot of research and trying to get us off fossil fuels.
There have been a lot of advancement in transportation in the past decades, and much more to come in the coming few decades. However, climate change is also advancing rapidly. Studies show that unless something major is done soon, climate change will become irreversible sometime in the next century. Inventions such as the electric plane, the progressively better electric car, the Hyperloop, and many other things are helping fight global climate change. However, it remains to be seen whether they will work well enough and whether they will be adopted quickly enough to be able to stop climate change.
The only way that we're going to have a really huge impact on climate change as far as changing transportation goes is the widespread adoption of it, because I think that the per car benefit is pretty minimal, but on a large scale it can be drastic. So I hope that over time, in the near future, we make electric cars not just kind of cool and like a neat thing to have or support because they're new and interesting, but better than cars in general. Like, I want manufacturers to make electric cars be the best kind of cars, not just a kind of car. So I think that once that happens across many different car manufacturers, then a lot of people are going to start getting into them, not because it's cool or whatever, or not getting into it because it's too expensive or they can't go far enough or the technology isn't that good, but because they actually are the best kind of car and they are affordable. And then as a result of that, I think that the widespread adoption we'll start to see this sort of positive side effects on climate change. But I don't know if I think that the climate change in general is not going to be solved by one thing like transportation. I think it's going to be a whole shift in the way that we think about energy use, and one piece of that is how we move around.
Climate change is one of the most major, if not the most major, crises that has befallen the Earth in the past few centuries. It is an extremely pressing issue, and it could alter humankind, the Earth, and our world as we know it. It is up to us to solve it in the next century or even half-century, or we will never be able to go back.